We're talking to Sally Kornbluth, who's the president of MIT. Let's get back to the big brouhaha over anti-Semitism. I mean, I've read some of these stories. There were some terrible things going on at universities across the country, and MIT. I read about the graffiti about IDF, and a lot of kids there had been students in the Israeli army, people being surrounded and harassed. So there were definitely incidents. But do you think this was ever really about anti-Semitism, this crackdown on schools like yours?
So this is a really complicated question. I will say this. I am not going to minimize the importance of anti-Semitism, but it's not only on campuses. It's in this country and in this world. Campuses reflect what's going on in the larger world. Do I think that people said things that I find reprehensible on campuses? Yes. We were very fortunate not to have any anti-Semitic violence at MIT. As you say, there are places across the country that was not the case. I do think it's important that in response to all of these criticisms, we did scrutinize all our processes. We did increase education around anti-Semitism, and we did tighten up our disciplinary processes to be clear what you can and can't do. But do I think look, it's something that's important to me personally as a Jew. But look, everybody's acknowledged, I think, that it's also something that is being used as a proxy for a whole range of issues. And we are, the consequences of which are interesting, because if you think about it, whether it's anti-Semitism or other behaviors on campus, the things that are attracting the ire of the administration and others are resulting in punishment, if you will, in the research funding realm. And these two things are not actually related to each other. And so do I think we need to be vigilant about anti-Semitism? By the way, other prejudices? Yes. Do I think that things people say on campus should affect scientific progress in this country? No.
Well, two more things about having to do with what's going on in Gaza. It struck me during this whole disaster after the terrorist attack in Hamas and the terrible things going on there that I can understand how if I was a Palestinian and I was in Gaza looking at what happened to Gaza, I would want to do something about it. It seemed as though in the aftermath there was so much concern about anti-Semitism that students who legitimately were concerned about the slaughter in Gaza didn't have an avenue to protest. So how can you protest if you are... Even lately, there have been more killings in Gaza by Israeli forces.
So a couple things. One is, we have put we have not banned protest on our campus. And, I hate to say it, but protest is sort of a tradition on campuses on a whole realm of issues. What we've done is put rules around protest so that they don't impede, our classroom work. You're not allowed to protest in a classroom. So that they don't, block access, et cetera. I think people should be able to express these things freely without stopping the activity or harassing other people. So that's one thing. The other thing, though, is that, look, we've been very concerned about Islamophobia. We've been very concerned about, anti-Palestinian prejudice as well as anti-Semitism. And we try, when we invite in external speakers, for example, to have people speak to the whole realm of political viewpoints. And, by the way, our students invite speakers of all sorts on campus. I might not like what any one of them has to say, but as long as they're not, harassing or inciting violence, I believe they should be able to say it on our campus.
Well, I read how last May MIT banned the class president from commencement for allegedly misleading campus officials about the speech she gave that called for MIT to sever ties with Israel. So had she told you what she was going to say, would you have allowed her to say it?
That is a really interesting question. I think the answer is yes. It might not have thrilled me to the marrow, but the other thing is I would have then had a prepared sort of remarks in terms of an institutional standpoint, how we think about things. It would have been a lot more of a controlled situation. To me, it was not honest to present one script and then bring about another. The other thing is that it was a little bit like conducting a protest from the stage because there was coordinated folks in the audience that responded, et cetera. But yes, if we had been told exactly what someone says, we are not in the business of censorship. We would have just been prepared and we would have had what I hope would be a thoughtful, articulate commentary afterwards. rather than on the moment when, you're sort of thinking, what exactly should I say now?
Talking to Sally Kornbluth, president of MIT. Do you speak to, let's pick one, do you speak to Alan Garber about what's going on?
Of course I do.
What do you think about how Harvard's been handling the ever-changing position of the Trump administration? People have not paid attention. The New York Times reported the other day that the Trump administration was dropping their demand for cash payment. And of course, Trump couldn't handle that. So at 2 a.m. or something, he posts on Truth Social, now I want $1 billion. They're worse than ever.
Right.
How do you think they're doing over there?
So I got to tell you, I think Alan Garber is fantastic. I wish I had a half of his sort of calm demeanor. I mean, he is like as steady as the days are long.
You know what he's not? A bullion. He really is not. I mean, let me tell you.
He's not a what?
He's not a bullion. I mean, he's just...
No, he may not be a bullion.
Yeah,
we all have to have our skills.
That's right.
But
he
is... and maybe he's... Yeah, it would be inexplicable if he were totally a bullion right now. But anyway, he's incredibly steady, thoughtful. Look, he's been at Harvard a long time. I know him for a long time because we were both provosts at the same time when I was provost at Duke and he was provost at Harvard. He's always been that way. Thoughtful, steady. I've never seen him lose his temper. And look, he's got to surf this ever-changing environment. And we're all lucky that Harvard's doing what they're doing because we're part of a large ecosystem. It's not just MIT. I don't just worry about MIT. I worry about the higher education ecosystem.
Exactly.
We collaborate with Harvard. We're partners with them on so many things.
Can we talk about the ecosystem for a second? Marjorie and I, who luckily do not have to do what you do or run a law firm or run a media company, we just do whatever it is we do here from 11 to 1 every day. We have said from day one, for example, when some of your colleagues were folding as quickly as they possibly could, with a couple of wonderful exceptions, and we had some of those presidents on our show from Mount Holyoke and the guy from Connecticut. What college? Wesleyan and Connecticut, a few others like
Michael
that.
Roth. Yep.
Why didn't all of you try to organize each other? We talked to Jeffrey Sonnenfeld from Yale School of Management about this too, and stand up as one, just like the media companies should have, just like the law firms should have, so that the weaker amongst them, not everybody's MIT and Harvard, would know that all of your colleagues were standing beside him. Why didn't that happen?
Here's the problem. Well, first of all, I will say that, we filed an amicus brief in the Harvard suit. We've been sort of at the forefront on the NIH suits and DOD suits, et cetera. So we have tried to participate, as partners. But part of the issue is that higher education is incredibly heterogeneous. And so you've got red state schools, you got blue state schools, you got public schools, you got private schools, you got schools of different size. Look, I can't imagine what it's like to be the president of a red state public who is under intense pressure from the legislature regarding funding in their state. And so it's been very, very hard to get everybody onto the same page.
How about a lot of bodies? Even if I'm serious,
it's a good question.
Not everybody.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. When we stepped up, I would say, 20-something universities entered some of these lawsuits, et cetera. In a situation where everyone feels like they have to protect their campus, their board has fiduciary duty, I think the notion of standing up really is worrisome to people. I've been very lucky, honestly, because our board is incredibly supportive and incredibly smart about the whole thing, seriously. And that has made it much easier to stand up.
Why was the MIT Corporation so quickly and uniformly supportive of you and the Harvard Corporation so weak and slow when it came to Claudine Gay?
It's so hard for me to speak to what the Harvard Corporation...
What do you say when you're not on air about that? I'm sure you answer
when I'm not on the air about it?
That's right. I'm all listening.
I really can only speak to our corporation. And look, they had just hired me. They did a huge search for a long time.
Well, Claudine Gay was pretty new too, by the way.
Yes. No, I know. I don't know. I'm just very lucky that they were very supportive.
You think they
thoughtful.
sold her down the river?
Oh my God! Would I ever say that on radio?
I don't know, man. That's why I asked.
I got to this role because I'm actually pretty savvy.
You are.
Well, here's something I would appreciate your savvy opinion on. A lot of Americans have lost faith in public school education, and there's a lot of frustration there. But I think we think of higher education as kind of the crown jewel, MIT, Harvard, and a lot of UMass, Amherst. I mean, there's a lot of great schools. My alma mater, Stanford, great schools. Trump hasn't really gone after Stanford for some reason.
It's so far away.
Maybe that's it. I don't
It's
know.
like the Super Bowl. He doesn't travel that far.
That's right. But I do wonder about the next 3 years. I mean, I wonder about other universities, like you mentioned earlier, these research places like in China, people going, because immigrants come here
I know.
and then they go on to form all these companies and do all these great things. What do you think is going to happen?
I don't know. First of all, 3 more years sounds like
a long time. Yeah.
And we do not know what's going to happen politically at this point as well, I will say. Look, for us, one of the hardest things now is the endowment tax, which is, a tax on the proceeds from our endowment.
It's more than quadrupled for you, right?
Yeah, so it was 1.4%. Now it's 8%.
5.5 times as much.
Yeah, and that is $240 million a year.
That's a lot.
Think about how much science you can get for $240 million a year. Now, are we managing it? Yes. Are we still forging ahead on all of our exciting initiatives? Yes. But we've had to reconfigure things. We've had to merge things. And it's not the way we should be spending our time and money.
Yeah. The thing, also, Lincoln Labs is part of MIT, and that's been tied with the defense industry for all these years. And I would think, Trump is really into the military.
And we have a lot of funding from the U.S., DOW, I guess now, the DOW as well. But, there seems to be a disconnect, again, between what the punishments are and what the impacts are. So no question about it, Lincoln Labs has been huge in U.S. defense. Prototyping things for our soldiers, even things like, how do you deal with unmanned aerial, vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. And I will say, fortunately, Lincoln Lab continues to be funded and moving forward, but it can't be disconnected from everything else that's going on MIT campus. There's so much research and, interchange that goes on between Lincoln and, the mothership. It's, we really need to see robust continuation of support for our research universities.